Well, welcome everyone to Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game. I'm your host, Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, retirement happens whether you're ready or not. Part 1 in our series on your retirement reality check with author, speaker, and investment advisor representative, Lindahl Lucas. Welcome to the show, Lindahl.
Hey, Steve, thank you very, very much for having me here. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here, and I had you on before.
Yes.
And today we're talking about, and by the way, your book is going to be coming out on Amazon.com.
Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit about that real quick.
It's called the Retirement Reality Check. And the fundamental parts of retirement, most Americans are not prepared for retirement. So it's just really taking a quick little tour down the preparation for retirement and just hopefully getting people, if they pick up the book, which they should, it's on Amazon.com, help them map out the retirement.
Now, you have another book, Pros and Cons of Annuities, as well.
Yes.
Kind of a controversial subject, and you address it, both sides.
I do. I really, annuities has kind of had like a negative stigma, and some people really don't understand it. And there's so many moving parts with annuities that make it a little difficult for people to understand. So I made a simple, easy, quick read book for people to get really just a good idea of how they work.
Well, let's just talk right away on one of your big complaints. Or without a retirement plan, failure is almost guaranteed.
And this is definitely probably the number one problem. The number one problem, because how can you fix a problem if you don't know you have a problem? And the thing that I always preach, I teach, and I tell my clients is that, look, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so it's like setting up a retirement plan is probably the number one thing you can do, even if you don't think you have anything, even if you don't think you have enough. Even if you're afraid because you think, oh, I don't want to show anybody my financial assets. Some people are afraid. But if you just take a time, at least you take a 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it may be, to at least set up a retirement plan, your success goes through the roof.
All right, so we need a plan, and the front end of every plan that I've seen you put out is you have to create a budget. It's mandatory in retirement, and I'm in shock that my baby boomer brethren don't do this. I'm in shock. And you say it's absolutely necessary.
It is. It's simple. People don't like to sometimes see what they actually do on a daily basis. I think they're afraid to really actually know. But the truth of it is that if you don't, how can you know what you need each month? How can you know what you're going to need to have as guaranteed income? How can you plan for that? So you can't plan unless you know.
And by the way, if you say, Steve, I have never done a budget in my life, if you want to write me at steve@lifesizesolutions.com. We'll send you, right from Lindahl, we'll send you a free budget. You can kind of see what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, that's a great tool.
Discovering your psychological profile. I mean, I'm thinking people don't understand their own psychonomics, and the start of learning that curve is actually doing a risk tolerance test. Why is that so important the way you think?
Well, actually, Steve, you and I spoke about this a little earlier, but the risk tolerance test just tells you, how risky somebody would like to be, or how aggressive somebody would like to be, say with their investments. Say they're in the stock market, say they're either with their IRA, their 401k, they have maybe assets in the market. I mean, are you in a very aggressive fund, which just means, can you lose 30, 50, 80% like people did in 2008? Or are you more conservative? Do you want to be in bonds? Do you want to be in something that has the potential for a modest gain, but for a modest low risk?
Well, listen, after 2008, and most of the boomers that would probably chime in with me and say, we don't have the timeline any longer to support risk, right?
Oh,
so
absolutely.
As I'm getting older into my 60s, I'm like, oh, hey, guys, time out.
Yes.
I was aggressive as a young man, pulled back to a moderate position when I got in my midlife, but now I'm conservative. I still have money in the market, but nowhere near what I had and nowhere near aggressive.
Oh, yeah. Well, but see, now that is the point. That's the point, that when you are in retirement, you need to take risk out of your portfolio. And some people don't get that. One of the things, there's a rule, okay, and it's called the 4% rule. And Robert Merton, he's a professor at Harvard, did a study, Nobel Prize in economics. He actually he wrote an article basically stating that if you plan on taking 4% out a year in your investment pile of cash, your investments in the stock market, whatever it is, you have a 65% chance of failure. That just means running out of money in your retirement. So even just that low amount of money is there. So if you have more risk in your portfolio, that 4% should be 2%. If you have lower risk, it might be able to make it happen, but there's still a 65% chance of failure.
You know, if you say, Steve, I've never taken a risk tolerance test in my life, go ahead and just say, I'd like to take that test. Just write me at steve@lifesizesolutions.com, and I'll send you the risk tolerance test. You might find out, hey, am I conservative, conservative, moderate, moderately aggressive, or aggressive? I'm just using 5 generic classifications. And you'll kind of get an idea, and then you'll be able to match that up to your 401k. Listen, Lindahl.
Yes, sir.
I look at a 401k a person's in, and I look at their tests, and they're not the same.
And you know how often that happens, right?
A lot.
Yes. It's more, that's actually what we were talking about a little bit earlier, is that happens all the time. And people haven't even taken that risk tolerance test. And if they were to take the test itself, then they'd be able to see, okay, now I see how it actually is going to apply, because, and I always go back to 2000, 2008, and I can use 2000, 2001, and 2002. But, you know, if you have the possibility of losing 25% or 50% in your assets, and that's not going to feel good, you know what I mean? If you have that possibility, I said, maybe you need, and you don't like it, and you're at that type of a risky level, then you need to start changing to something less risky.
Well, I think that most of the boomers right now, which are the largest group of retiring, 10,000 a day,
10,000.
We're talking about some serious pullback. We do not want risk. We don't have a timeline to support it. And another thing that I noticed when we're building out a plan, we talked about a budget, we talked about risk tolerance tests, is this idea of, does the client, do we know as normal lay people, do we even know what our tax bracket is? Because some of this is taxable, some of our monies are tax deferred, some of our monies are tax free.
Yes.
But I don't know of my tax bracket to make a call whether I should be doing taxable, tax deferred, or tax free.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, just because so many Americans do not know what tax bracket they're in. In fact, you know, they'll guess and take a swing at it. But really, when you start looking at, you know, where you're at and what your AGI, which is your adjusted gross income, and how that's going to apply to your taxes itself, once you understand that, then you can make better choices, of course. You know, too many, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but, you know, you start looking at like municipal bonds for tax savings, and there are other tax saving vehicles out there that people can use. But, you know, people buy them because they don't want to pay taxes, because we all hate taxes, right?
We do.
Death and taxes.
Right.
But the point of it is that it's figuring out where you're at and then figuring out how to leverage it to your benefit.
Okay, most people, and again, you say, Steve, I don't know what bracket I'm in. If you write me at steve@lifesizesolutions.com, I'll send you the marginal progressive tax bracket is what it is. Nobody pays that rate because we have several levels of rate, and after the tax change, which has been huge. Especially if you're retiring today, you're already getting $24,000 in your standard deduction, and another $2,600 if you're married, just for being 65. And the brackets, the margins came down. So we had higher deductibles and lower tax brackets. So for people retiring right now, from a tax point of view, this is about as good as it gets. Now, let's just say, Lindahl, I'm just thinking about the tax here. I was just looking, and so many people are, this is just a basic concept. I have a CD rate right now that's paying about $275 for 5 years. And I have a annuity 5-year rate paying about 3.5. All right? So I look at the annuity and say, it's going to win hands down. But I noticed that you talk about the tax deferral of the annuity, because you said that in my CD, even if I use it or not, I have to pay taxes every single year.
Every year on the
I didn't
CD,
even use it.
Actually, nobody really is aware of that. Now, you know, they're aware of it. You know, at the end of the year, they get this 1099, and they think like, oh my God, what is this? Why do I have this? But you're going to get taxed. You're going to get taxed on your CD every year. Whereas if you had an annuity, it's tax deferred. So much better.
Not tax free, tax deferred.
Exactly.
So if I'm not paying taxes every year on that 3.5, there's some economic benefit to that.
Compound growth.
I'm all over it. All right. So to redux, I need a plan.
Yes, sir.
That plan has to have. You have mandatory down here.
I do.
Have to have a budget. I have to say, in all the seminars that I do publicly, I'm aghast at a third of my audience has never done a budget on any basis. And on top of this, I need to know my own psychonomics. I need to know what is my psychological profile. And a risk tolerance test is a beginning. It's certainly not an end all, but it's a beginning. And the last thing, I need to know my tax bracket. And again, any of these things, say, Steve, I want to see it all. Steve@lifesizesolutions.com. I'll send it all to you. Before we close out the segment, we have a plan. You have plans. You meet with clients on this. You have almost, how many clients? You have almost 4,000, something like that?
Total clients, probably a little more than 4,000.
And you're just now telling them they need to get saddled into this, right?
You know what? When I started looking at my mother and my father's retirement, it really made me take a very, very close look at my own retirement. Things that that I was going to have to deal with as well in the future. And I wanted to put myself in the best position possible, of course.
Today.
Today for the future. Well, and that's why retirement planning. That's why I've been so passionate about making sure that not just for myself, but of my clients and my clients, my family, anybody that I deal with. I really want to make sure that they're aware that they have the right tools to make the right decisions for themselves in the future. Because let's face it, when things go wrong, you're 78, you're 85, and it's really
too late.
Listen,
don't forget to watch our next segment on Wall Street, where the house always wins. Part 2 in our series on your retirement reality check. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or in this case, your financial advisor. You're watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.